welcome to another episode of Tesseract Talks, the place where we put the spotlight on tech trends, startups, and VCs. I'm your host, Marko, the founder and CEO of Tesseract Analytics, and it is my pleasure today to have with us Dr. Cecilia Dones as our guest. She's a founder and chief data officer at Standard Deviations, keynote speaker, and an author. Cecilia, welcome. How are you?
Good. And thank you so much for this opportunity to speak to your audience.
Yeah, my pleasure. So, in preparation for the episode, I went through your CV on LinkedIn, and you had an interesting career from being a research analyst to then working for a couple of big known consumer brands, and then finally doing a PhD parallel with your own company. Can you take us through your journey and tell us a bit more about the roles and some projects you had so far?
Yeah. So I would say my journey is nonlinear. And what I mean by that is what has been my North Star my entire career has been following my curiosity and following my curiosity specifically around telling stories about people using data. And so the first part of my career, and I actually say this with much pride, I am still a quant researcher. I'm still curious about people's stories and figuring out why are they doing that? How are they doing that? And how can we help them further do that better? And so the first part of my career was really focused on quant research, primarily in the marketing advertising space. And the second part, I did join a few big brands because I wanted to do more with the data. And I was very curious. Why was the data in a silo? Why did not other people not trust the data? And so I started building enterprise data capabilities under my belt and my technical training. I'm a trained statistician, so I'm not a data scientist. I am proudly a statistician, which means my code books and my repos are a bit rubbish, I will admit. However, when it comes to the technical underpinnings of the mathematics that supports all of these algorithms and technologies, that is my forte. And so the second part of my career was building data and analytical capabilities for organizations trying to do digital and AI transformations. And so the third part, or where I am now, so I decided to finish my doctoral dissertation. So thank you for mentioning. I did successfully finish. And the things I study trust and authenticity signals in technology mediated interpersonal communications in virtual environments. It is more than
Wow,
one breath.
a lot to unpack there.
It's a very, very academic, fancy way of saying I'm really interested in how we build relationships with each other when we use technology to help us with those communications. And so how do we trust each other when we don't know any longer if the person across the way, are they an avatar? Are they AI? Do they have an earpiece that helps them understand what the language is, or maybe feeding information about who the other person is? They're augmented with AI. So how do we build these relationships? How do we practice authenticity? Does authenticity matter when we're trying to build relationships? So it has applications in both a professional commercial sense as well as a personal sense, because like it or not, technology is here to stay. It is absolutely a part of our lives. So we have to be choiceful and mindful of how we utilize it to manage the most precious type of resources, I would argue, which is our relationships in our everyday lives. And I'm also an educator. So I teach AI ethics. I believe AI ethics is particularly important now as we're speeding through and developing all these new experiences, always making sure that we keep people at the center.
Yeah, very relevant topic. And I guess in the next few years or decades, it will be at the center of as we see AI develop, definitely have to have ethics in mind. So, I mean, great. So what then motivated you to also create your current company, Standard Deviations? And what kind of organizations do you usually help?
Yes. So 3 standard deviations, it is a maths joke. So I labeled it that. So if you know what Gaussian curves are, I'm probably going to be a person for you. And also it is also a reflection of my philosophy in life, meaning I firmly believe that the most wonderful, transformative types of experiences that you have in your life all starts with a single yes. But by definition, we don't know which yes. And so on your average everyday middle of the road mean type of conversation, how's the weather, how's the coffee, all of those things, most likely those are the conversations that are not going to necessarily lead to the one yes that changes your life. However, in those moments where you have connection, in those moments where you find something that you didn't think you were going to find, those moments of where you get that one yes that changes the trajectory of your life. Well, if we look at a bell curve, if we look at a Gaussian curve, it happens at the third standard deviation. And by definition, that is rare. So I am just curious to keep looking for those conversations to see what happens next. In terms of organizations that I help, I do help small, medium businesses as well as Fortune 500 enterprise level businesses, typically with AI and data digital transformations. The nuance in my services is that, yes, I can definitely help in terms of people process platform, particularly if you're interested in understanding how to simplify your tech stack or modernize your tech stack. I can definitely help. And I've worked with many CIOs to help do that. However, when it comes to organizational transformation, yes, platform matters, but I would argue the people in the process matter more. And so when I go into organizations talking about AI and digital transformations, I very much focus on the business culture of that organization, the organizational psychology. What are actually people doing? How are they motivated? How are we aligning incentives, motivations, and behaviors? How are we creating a culture of trust amongst ourselves for experimentation with these new technologies? How do we create the culture of creativity and critical thinking? So those skills become the skills that are durable and helps us to actually create value from the technologies we have and the technologies we want to adopt. So I do end-to-end services, yes, of course, but I do have a focus on people and process in the context of the technologies that are already in place or the technologies that they want to buy.
Okay. And now, my next question is, you've already touched upon, but maybe you can elaborate again, or in a bit from a different angle. So why do you so firmly believe that empathy and ethics are so important for AI and digital transformation?
I think it's so critically important because at the end of the day, all of these technologies, all of these tools we've ever built for ourselves is to help us to navigate the environment. So people have always been at the center of these things. And sometimes, and I hang out in VC circles and startup circles as well. And sometimes I hear conversations where it's wonderful. It's the engineering is beautiful and the opportunities are so great. However, the abstraction of human experience into ones and zeros somewhat sometimes dehumanizes sometimes the conversation. So I always ask the question, who are we actually helping by doing this? When we say scale, how is this going to make other lives better? Are there lives that are going to be not as good or maybe affected negatively as a result of making all these other lives better? And so these kind of difficult, sometimes perceived as philosophical questions are not always asked in these conversations. And so I think it's really important to bring them in because the last time I checked in a consumer society, I have not met a machine yet that eats pizza or buys clothes. And so at the end of the day, all of these services, all of these goods that we build are in service of consumption by people, not machines. And so I continue to advocate for having people at the center, human in the loop, and making sure that there's always a cognizant individual within the team that is focusing on making sure that we always make sure considering the human experience in all of this.
Yeah, and I feel like, because obviously I talk to a lot of startups, it's a big focus of what Tesseract Analytics does, and sometimes maybe that those ethical questions are not the first ones that come, I guess, when you're thinking to build the next big thing, to the next IPO. Those are yeah, ethical questions maybe don't come on top. It's more about like optimization, cost cutting, this scaling, and then yeah, I guess we need people to remind us that ethics are very empathy are important part of this whole story.
Yes.
So another thing that I've noticed is that you have what is CMO to do with AI newsletter. So can you tell us a bit more about that? And what would be your, let's say, 3 recommendations for CMOs?
Okay. So another funny story that came about. So I am primarily known in the marketing advertising space. So at the intersection of marketing and technology. And people would ask me all the time, oh, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? And so at some point I decided, I should probably start to write these things down and maybe I can help more people in this way. And so that's how I started a newsletter. What is a CMO to do with AI? And content strategists can definitely give feedback to me. My content strategy on the newsletter is typically based on what are current conversations I'm having with marketing leaders and CMOs, and how can I translate that into lessons that I could teach to others. So it's quite contemporary from that perspective, but I love bringing in interdisciplinary. So thought leaders from economics, thought leaders from psychology, thought leaders from sociology, thought leaders from other disciplines, philosophy included. I like bringing those interdisciplinary points of views into that newsletter because often I find that there are frameworks, there are rules of thumb, there are lessons to be learned from other disciplines that marketers and advertisers, if they just looked over the fence or looked across the water, they could learn these lessons too without having to go through the pains of actually experiencing all those lessons all at once. And so they could just apply from other fields. So I love bringing that all in. And so the 3 things I would say. So for some of us who are very, very fortunate, we will be at Cannes Lions this week. And so there's all the top marketers, all the CMOs, and all the tech companies are there as well. And so the 3 things I would say is there's going to be a lot of conversations there and a lot of conversations around AI and technology and how it can bring more efficiency and how it can bring more productivity and all of those wonderful benefits. I would be very curious in all of those conversations. How often are we talking about people and how often are we talking about consumers? So every time there's an opportunity with a technology to improve on efficiency, operations, all of those wonderful things, how is it actually benefiting the customer? And that would be one thing I would keep top of mind during this week. The second thing I would think about is the beautiful thing about the arts, and this is broader now, but more commercially, we think about marketing and advertising as being a more artistic endeavor. The wonderful thing about it is that it is about experience. Why is everyone going to Cannes? Well, because it is an experience. We could have just easily done everything over webinar, but they don't. People still gather. So where I caution the fervor and the excitement around adopting technology, I would encourage leaders to think about what is the consumer experience over efficiency. So how are we making sure that we are making efforts in improving the experience as opposed to just looking at efficiency? And the third thing I would say is for CMOs who are very much overwhelmed because there's so many exogenous outside factors happening right now. There's a lot of pressure from technologies to be doing everything with AI. What does that even mean? Is it even applicable to what you're doing? There's a lot of fear of missing out, FOMO. If I don't do it, my competitors are doing it. I would argue that the most strategic leaders that think in the longer run and will actually survive all of the changes, some of the foundations, some of the fundamentals that we know are true. So understanding our brand building, that hasn't changed so much. Maybe the tools have changed, but brand building is still critical. Understanding our 4Ps in marketing, making sure that we have product and price and promotion and all of those things in order. The fundamentals still matter despite all of the noise and excitement that happens as a result of technology. Making sure we're a little bit grounded in those ways with those kind of durable best practices we have in the discipline, I would argue is critically important, especially with the excitement of Cannes at the moment. So I still provide AI and data digital transformation services. So I can play fractional roles. We do offer end-to-end services, but again, it's much more focused on people and process in context of the platforms that are in place. We also do workshops, a lot of workshops on education and upskilling, cross-skilling, very much for SMEs, so subject matter experts, but as well as business side stakeholders. So I firmly believe that everyone needs some level of AI literacy. I'm not saying everyone needs to be fluent. No, I'm not suggesting we all start coding LLMs. Please don't. But I am suggesting that we do understand the fundamentals in this space as we utilize these technologies in our every day-to-day lives. And then I also provide one-on-one coaching, especially for our burgeoning leaders who are trying to figure out, ooh, I want to go into the space. How do I start to build some of those skills? And so I still do that as well. And so if anyone is interested in finding me, there are three primary places. So the first one is the website, 3 Standard Deviations. In transparency, it is going to go through a refresh very, very soon. And so I'm excited about that for the back half of this year. You can always find me on LinkedIn. So please find me there. I do have the newsletter there, as well as I'm pretty active on the platform. And then I also have a personal Substack, which is Authentic Interactions. And so there I'm kind of exploring the ideas around the other AI authentic interactions. So how do we choose to live our lives? Understanding that technology both helps and hinders our evolution and our progress. And so that's where I bring more of the academic and interdisciplinary perspectives. Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much, and to everyone who's watching. And yes, maybe next time in London. So this might be the one, yes, that changes our lives.